Well, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for sticking around. And as I said earlier, because it's a relatively small, cozy group, we're happy to keep this semi-informal. We have a group of slides here that we'll talk about, but honestly, if you have comments or questions, we're happy to take them. And then mostly what we have, the sort of highlight here, is really a panel discussion. The discussants are all characterized by being people who've both received important and innovative Foundation for PM&R grants, but also people who've reviewed the grants. So we have all sorts of really valuable perspectives. But we really do want to welcome you here to the course, Getting Funded, How to Write and Submit a Successful Foundation for Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation Research Grant Proposal. And I have a few key announcements here. The first is, again, as I said, please welcome and feel free to participate as you wish. Second is, please mute or turn off your cell phones. And, of course, no audio or video recordings are allowed. The third is, please make sure that you complete the individual session evaluation forms. They really do help us with future planning. And we're very interested in this as presenters as well. And the evaluations are located on the mobile app. And finally, please visit the exhibit hall if it's still open. It's not open. Okay, well, we'll take care of that. So my name's Dr. Elliot Roth. I am the president of the Foundation for PM&R right now. I'm a long-standing member of the American Academy of PM&R. I've been on the board of directors of the Foundation for PM&R for a few years. I'm also at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine and Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. Unfortunately, our immediate past president, Dr. Ross Zafont, is unable to join us today, but we're very pleased to have three panelists here. Dr. Prakash Jayabalan, who is also at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine and Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, Dr. Adam Tenforde, who's at Harvard Medical School in Boston, and Dr. Patricia Zheng, who's at University of California, San Francisco, and they'll be joining us. We do want to highlight a few things. First, to point out, we have no disclosures that are related to this presentation. But we have a few objectives for you. And as I said, we're going to keep this semi-informal, so comments or questions are welcome. If the first objective is for you to gain insights into the rationale, why apply for Foundation for PM&R research grants. And the second related to that is to understand the knowledge gain knowledge about what the current grant success rate is like, which adds to the rationale for why to do this. The third is for you as potential writers, but also potential reviewers of grant proposals to understand the criteria used to evaluate the applications. Fourth is to learn strategies that might improve your own ability to write successful grant applications and to be successful. Fifth is to gain guidance from the past grant recipients and likewise to gain some guidance from the grant reviewers. So first, I'm going to give you very briefly some of the background, the statistics, the sort of basic facts related to the Foundation for PM&R. It actually started back in 1985 by Texas physiatrists, was known as the PM&R Education and Research Fund, and ultimately all the assets were turned over to the American Academy of PM&R back in 2000, and then 2 years later it became an independent foundation, which is what it is now, has its own board of directors. It's actually organized as an important freestanding not-for-profit organization. But this is sort of what's key, and we want you to be aware of this. Since it started, we've given out more than $2.35 million in grants, which is quite striking in a relatively short amount of time, for a total of 157 research projects proposed and conducted by more than 100 investigators. And also to understand the growth, and the growth trajectory is very positive and accelerating also, and that is that it started with about $600,000 in assets, which is pretty good by itself, but it's really gone significantly higher now at $3.2 million. And it's strictly, singularly about giving out grants for research proposals. That's very, very important. So one of the parts of the mission is to build the research capacity of physical medicine and rehabilitation physicians, specifically with career development grants, helping young researchers to build credibility and also get the experience in writing grants and conducting grant-supported research activities, jump-starting new lines of innovative research in physiatric care. And by the way, that's not only for new investigators, but also mid-career and later career investigators, and improving patient care by disseminating the foundation-funded research findings. So we do this through, of course, supporting pilot funding so that physiatric investigators can ultimately use that data, leverage that data to write that into other external grants, particularly federal grants or other foundation or industry-related grants, supporting young investigators to launch research careers, as I said, even for experienced investigators to be able to pursue new lines of research. And it's very important to understand there's no limit related to the types or the nature of what gets proposed in any of the major areas and sometimes not so major areas that PM&R physicians are involved in and that PM&R physician-related research touches. As I said, we have about $3.2 million in assets. We pretty much are on track to continue to grow those assets, estimated about 5% a year. But this year, we're very excited because we received a major anonymous gift that will allow us to give 3 brand new research grants in the coming year, which is a really wonderful thing. And this is actually shows you sort of the growth curve of how the assets look. And many, of course, a big part of our success, especially a big part of our assets, have to do with donations that come in. And we're also very pleased that the growth trajectory in the amount of funding that we have and the funding that we get is growing from donations. Total donations have been increasing by 25% over the last 5 years, which is quite striking. We're very pleased because the gift size sometimes seems on the relatively smaller size. We are doing everything we can to expand the size of those grants, and that's sort of a key point. And the average gift size now is almost 50% larger than it was just 5-6 years ago or so. And the last 3 years were quite record-setting related to donations, which puts us in a good position to be able to expand the size of those grants. So what? So as I said, we have some success rates. This is a good rationale for another good part of the rationale for thinking about why it's valuable for you to apply for grants or think about grants, and for that matter, making contributions to the foundation. So first is that 50% of all grant recipients have used the data that was derived from foundation-supported grants to be able to secure additional research support. So that's a key point. But also that 70% of grant recipients used their foundation-funded findings in research presentations at national meetings like the one we're at right now. And 65%, about 2/3 of all the recipients, published findings in peer-reviewed journals, which is another very exciting outcome. And this is the one I'm most excited about, which is that everybody who's received grants in the past continues to do research even to this day. And that's a really, really important part of the payoff of both writing the grants, submitting to the grants, but also for those who make contributions to support the grants. So again, total grant dollars have been increasing significantly. We were able to increase in 2024 because we actually gave out 2 of what traditionally had been only 1 a year of the Molnar Pediatric PM&R research grants. You could see here it's about $120,000 given out in total grants for the year. That was actually spread across 7 different grants, which we actually just announced last night at a group at a meeting with the grant recipients and the donors. The number of grants awarded declined right at the onset of the pandemic, but actually we're on pace to pick it back up. So I mentioned something about the average size of the grants. Again, the average size is growing, which we're excited about. We want to grow this even more. That's an important part of the message here. A key goal to continue to increase the size and the number of grants is of course, having the assets available to do that. I just want to sort of highlight a few key elements related to the growth in the size and the number of grants. First, we have a mid-career investigator research grant. For those of you who are mid-career or know people or work with people who are mid-career, be thinking about this. We were able to increase the size of that grant from $20,000 to $25,000. We were also able to add a grant for pain management and spine care research for 2 years straight. We've added a cancer rehabilitation grant for a few years straight, again, based on very specific contribution. And as I mentioned, we're very excited about very sizable contribution to be able to support 3 new grants in this coming year. Interestingly enough, the number of applications has been relatively modest, and that's an important point and should be another part of the take-home message to all of you to be thinking about. We had a slight spike in the number of grant applications back in 2020, then rose again, and then dropped. This past year is actually a little bit less than the year before, so we want to see we truly want to see an increase in the number of these grants. But what this means for you to know is that the success rate is quite striking. So many of you are familiar with what the government funding success rate, which is quite low. For some of the better institutes, it's maybe 15-ish%. For some of the NIH institutes and NIDILRR, and for many other commonly used government funded agencies, under 10%. We're talking single digits. For us, it's actually approaching 70%. Quite striking. So keep that in mind in terms of the success rate. I do want to point out the quality of the grant applications is very strong, and that's a key part of this. So even if the percent is high, it's not that we're taking less quality or lower quality projects. I mentioned earlier that we actually have quite a diverse type and number of topics, and I just want to sort of highlight that for any of you who are thinking about various topics. Don't think to yourself, I'm not going to apply for this because of a particular topic that may not fit what the foundation is looking for. We're looking genuinely for the best topic areas, the best quality projects in any topic area. Of course, there are very specific grants. For some of the grants are very specific topic areas that we will fund. But these are just for the past 5 years: cerebral palsy, chronic pain, COVID-19, gait disorders, lymphoma, osteoarthritis, phantom limb pain, spinal cord injury, stroke, TBI, telerehabilitation, and tendinopathy. And as part of that, I want to highlight for you who the grant recipients are that we just announced publicly this week. We're very excited about this. We have, because of the generosity of the Encompass Corporation, we have a mid-career investigator grant that Karina Bondi received. She's at the University of Pittsburgh on clinically relevant neurorehabilitation to mitigate aging and hypertensive-mediated cognitive decline after traumatic brain injury. We have, as we have for many years, had 3 Richard Matterson new investigator grants. This is for people who are relatively junior. We give out 3 of those. And we've given this year, we gave out grants to Nicole Katz from Spalding, who had a really dynamic grant on mechanistic impact of synovial fluid relaxin 2 on the progression of knee osteoarthritis. Syed Kadri from Moss on evaluating brain plasticity in moderate TBI patients with theta burst stimulation, and Jason Silver from University of Washington on bioengineered muscle tissue to assess muscle stem cell fate decisions with aging. I mentioned we have the Gabriella Molnar PM&R, pediatric PM&R research grant. Anders Asp from Mayo Clinic won the award this year for transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation to improve lower limb function and assess lower motor neuron health in children with spina bifida. We've for many years given out the Scott Nadler Passor Award for a musculoskeletal research grant. This year, we're pleased to have the winner, Adam Tenforde, who's pretty much a veteran at winning many of these awards. And he's going to be, he's at Spalding, as many of you know, and he'll be talking about, researching Achilles tendinopathy. And then the Tactile Medical Center Rehabilitation Research Grant will be, the recipient is Sharon Bushy, who's at Burke Rehab, and she'll be studying evaluating inpatient rehabilitation for metastatic cancer patients. This particular Tactile Medical Award is for cancer rehabilitation specifically. So I just want to sort of highlight what the opportunities are. Again, you have a sense of what this looks like. There is, for this coming year, an Encompass Mid-Career Investigator Research Grant, $25,000 to an experienced PM&R investigator to expand research in a different direction. And the Dorothea Glass PM&R Lifestyle Research Grant. This is brand new. We're looking for the inaugural award recipient. This will be a grant for $10,000 for physiatric research on sexuality or relationships or lifestyle issues that affect people with disabilities. Another brand new grant named after Martin Grayboyce, a chronic pain rehabilitation research grant. This will be one grant of $10,000 for physiatric research on the physiology of chronic pain and clinical management. And then another brand new grant named after Richard Herman for a neurorehabilitation research grant. It's another one single grant for $10,000 on research related to neuroscience, neurophysiology, or rehabilitation neuroengineering. We will, again, as I said, have three grants named after Richard Matterson, $10,000 each. This is for new young investigators. And then the Gabriella Molnar Pediatric Research Grant is also for $10,000. We'll still have the PASOR grant named after Scott Nadler for $30,000 related to musculoskeletal sports medicine problems. And then again, we're going to have the Tactile Medical Cancer Rehabilitation Research Grant for $10,000. So that's that's what will happen during the coming year. Thought it might be worthwhile for you, and we'll spend a little more time talking about this in just a few minutes, but it might be worthwhile for you. This is the exact wording of what we reviewers look for. So now you've gotten sort of the preview of how to write the research grant. So there's a handful of very specific criteria. The first is significant, and they look a lot, by the way, for those of you who write NIH grants or sometimes foundation grants or other kind of grants. They look very similar to the topic areas. So first is significant. Does the project address an important problem or critical barrier to progress in the field of PM&R? And the second is the quality and nature of the investigators. Are the PIs, collaborators, and other researchers well suited to the project, and have they demonstrated an ongoing record of accomplishment that may actually advance the field? And we also look to see, especially for the junior investigators, if they're appropriate for this kind of project, and if they are open to learning, eager to learn, open to mentoring, and willing to be developed. Third is a biggie, which is novelty or innovation. Does the application challenge and seek to shift current research or clinical practice paradigms by using novel theoretical concepts, approaches, or methodologies, or sometimes novel instrumentation or techniques or interventions? Fourth is we actually look at the actual approach, which is specifically, are the overall strategies, methodologies, and analyses well-reasoned and appropriate to meet the mission, meet the aims of the project. We look, of course, at the environment to make sure it's an appropriate place for the individual. Is it supportive? Will the scientific environment in which the work is done contribute to the probability of success? And then a big part of this, especially, again, as I said, for the junior investigators, is future potential. And so the question is, will the project have the potential to lay groundwork for future, more ambitious, potentially fundable projects in the future? And we take this very seriously because we do want to look at the return on investment. So we really do want to see that there's a potential for this to be leveraged to become something deeper. And then finally is impact on the field. Does the research have the potential to advance PM&R knowledge and or practice? I do want to point out, It does require reviewers to actually review the grant applications. So some of you might be interested in becoming a reviewer. I mentioned all the criteria. We want to talk a little bit today about the review process itself, but we do, of course, need reviewers. We love the reviewers, sometimes provide extraordinarily favorable feedback to the applicants, and even for the ones that don't get funded, the feedback actually to them could be very valuable. So I just want to sort of conclude by pointing out it's very easy to apply for these grants. It's also very easy to review the grants, and it's also, of course, for those of you who are interested, motivated by this, it's also very easy to make a gift. And so we do want to make it easy for you today, and if not today, then sometime in the future. Of course, this is very important, of course, for the future of the specialty. So with that, I do want to sort of, again, thank you for joining. And there's many ways that you could join us, including joining our Summit Club, which is to commit to giving $1,000 a year or more for a total of 5 years. If it's easy for you, please scan the QR code. And there's many other ways to make the donation. Our executive director, Phyllis Anderson, is here as well to answer some questions. But mostly, I'm very pleased to be able to welcome up here again, this is an informal panel. We'll ask each of the panel members to make a few comments very briefly, sort of about what your experience was as investigators and writers of grant applications, and what you're going to be what you have been working on using foundation funds, but also what your experience was like as a reviewer. So welcome to Adam and Patricia and Prakash. Come on up. There's a microphone on the table. Got it. Okay, good. So we could, again, this is informal. So Adam, do you want to tell us about your experience with writing the grants, plural grants, and getting them, and then we could talk about reviewing a little later.
Yeah, so all right, let's try that again. So first, I just have to say this is an incredible organization. I was very fortunate to learn about the opportunities actually first as a medical school student, where I was successful in getting a grant during my third year of medical school. And at that point, I was planning on applying in physical medicine rehabilitation. I think that was really helpful for my applications because it gave me my first experience to actually present at the AAP annual meeting. I applied for a new investigator award when I was finishing medical school and got that as an intern, and that was also very supportive for continuing some of the early work I've been doing in bone stress injuries. And then kind of as I start, so when I finished fellowship, I think the lens I was looked at as someone who really was serious about research and had already had success in getting a couple of grants. And that really gave me a nice opportunity to join the faculty at Spalding and to have some supported, funded time to do research. I did a biomechanical grant, which I don't know if that's still awarded. And then subsequently a mid-career award to support some work in metatarsal bone stress injuries. And then finally, I've been really grateful for the support on an investigation looking at platelet-rich plasma shockwave and the combination for mid-portion Achilles tendinopathy. And so I think, when I was told about these grants, I wasn't sure if I was adequately qualified, but what I had is I had really good mentors, Mike Fredrickson being the primary mentor for those early awards. And, having a good mentor team, having a good idea for an existing project, these grants are not large enough to support doing, something at the same level as like NIH DOD, and that's not what they're intended for. But I found them to be incredibly helpful for kind of a launching pad for really being viewed as a credible researcher, and, opportunities to apply for other federal and institutional awards.
Patricia is at, as we mentioned, at UCSF. And Patricia, you want to talk about your experience writing grant application, what it was like to get it?
Yes, I actually learned about these grants from Adam Tenforde when I was a resident. And the one grant that was really helpful for me was I had just left Stanford, which is a pretty academic center, and I went back to UCSF where I did my medical school. And, being when I was a medical student, I had already done a lot of research. And so I had assumed when I got back to UCSF that I would have a lot of infrastructure. But I was so PM&R is under the Department of Ortho at UCSF, and I was a second physiatrist to be hired. And we didn't have a residency, we didn't have fellowship. So all of a sudden, it was really hard for me to do the type of injection research that I had been used to. And I was really lost for a little bit. And so I thought back to Adam saying that these grants were great launching pads. And I started a new avenue of research for me. So we were doing more kind of like integrative spine research. So not just looking at outcomes after injection, it was more about like, does working with a PT in clinic for some higher risk back pain patient help their outcomes? So kind of more a multidisciplinary approach. And I think it was really helpful because kind of like what Adam said, like it helped to show that I was interested in research, and having some extramural grants helped me to raise my credibility. And then PhDs, and we have a lot of PhDs in our department who actually do really phenomenal back pain research, just not injection research. And so they kind of trusted me more. And so writing for the grants, as Adam was kind of implying, is helpful to have a team if you're still quite junior. So if you have anyone around you who might have experience getting grants, I think it's good to just go through the questions that Elliot had presented, like really think about how you can answer these questions. Try to find prior examples of successful grants. I think I actually stole one from Adam just to see what a good one would look like.
We lent it to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That sounds so much better. Yeah. It wasn't plagiarizing.
This grant.
Yes.
And you're going to model how you put together your new investigator award. And I've done that for like 2 or 3 other people. It's not to say that's a magic touch, but there's a formula.
Yes. And I think if you're not used to answering those specific questions, it's a very new process. And even now, like as I'm working on an R01 resubmission, it's those exact same questions. The answers just get longer, I would say.
That's right. That's right. Good. Thank you. Then Prakash, you want to tell us about your experience with applying for and getting the grant?
Yes. I echo everything that Adam and Patricia just said. I think you're never too late to apply is the first thing. I did apply. My first foundation grant was as a resident, and it was for a $10,000 grant. I think the same one that Adam was talking about, which is focused on biomechanics. But in the rate of inflation, $10,000, you're not going to be able to do a randomized clinical trial. So you have to understand that it may be something. So the first grant that I got was actually my mentor in Pittsburgh, Gwen Soa. She was the one that told me about the Foundation for PM&R. And because her career also started with a foundation grant, but she had some blood samples that were taken from another study, and she said, why don't we apply for a grant so you can test these samples for certain biomarkers associated with osteoarthritis? And that project was actually a big springboard for my scientific career. So one thing to maybe think about when you're thinking about, how am I going to do a study for $10,000 is that it could be something where you're testing, you're looking at data or collected data, and you're either going to pay for statistical analysis or you're going to pay for like biological analysis, which I did, or you're doing some secondary analysis of a study. That's actually certainly very, very good way to spend a relatively small amount of money in today's day. So that was a great stepping stone for me. And then further grants, then I started applying to like the Nadler grants and stuff like that, which are more where you can actually do a primary research project where you're getting your own subjects, where you're paying subjects maybe, and maybe also being able to do the testing. So I found that extremely helpful. The other thing, I think Dr. Roth talked about what they look for. I think one thing that's unique about the Foundation for PM&R compared to, say, NIH grants outside of K awards is that they want, I'm speaking with the foundation now, but they want to help people who are interested in research. So there's a whole part of the application that's related to what is your career goals, which is actually a really nice part of the application, and you don't see that often. When you apply for an R01, they're not asking you what are your career goals. That would be really nice if they actually cared that much, but often they don't care about that. So, K Awards they care, but this was like, so you have to think about that, and you have to think about how does this project fit in with my career goals. And I think the successful grants, I know we haven't got to the review process, but I think maybe some of mine was successful because I talked about how this project is not just going to lead to maybe getting me a grant, but it's going to help my clinical practice. It's going to help me with solidifying my research domain. So I think that was really nice because I felt the foundation wasn't just giving me money. They were also thinking about supporting my career. And I was talking to Jason, actually, I saw him yesterday, one of the ones who received it, and I had reviewed his specific games at RMSTP earlier this year, and I was like, oh, that's so awesome that the aims, like you refine them and you got the grant. And he said, no, I think the foundation really wanted to support my career as well, and that's a really nice thing.
Thank you. Questions or comments? I have a few for them, but there's things you want to talk about. All right, well, feel free to interrupt. So it's important that you talked about it as a springboard. That's a good word for it, I think. So we're all aware that typically $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 grants are not enough to be able to do, as you said, a big trial, and oftentimes not enough to do as much as you want to. Could you tell us a little bit more about sort of how specifically you used it, what you put the money into, and then how you actually took the data and leveraged it into other kinds of research grant proposals? You want to start?
Yeah. So full disclosure, if you are applying for randomized clinical trial for $10,000, not going to get funded. So just do not do that. But I would say, so yes, so like $10,000, you've got to be strategic as to what you're going to use that for. So like I said, the study has already been completed, biological samples have been collected. And so I wanted to test those for certain biological markers associated with osteoarthritis. And so I said, how is that, so that was what the grant was going to pay for. So I think so being very strategic on how you're going to spend those $10,000. And when you apply for NIH grants, you do have to be very specific on what those things you're going to purchase cost. So that's a major thing. The second thing is salary support. It's going to be very hard to put any salary support on a grant that small, and there's not a huge amounts of indirects that come to your organization. So it's unlikely, and it may not be the best use of that small part to put salary support of a tech or something like that on there. Just a thought. I mean, you could, but I think that may be more challenging. But yes, I think being strategic is very good.
I should have probably called Prakash before I decided how to use those $10,000, because I was like, yeah, I could pay for a part-time research assistant and collect data on this integrated spine clinic. And that was exactly the trouble I ran into. It's not enough to pay for much of a research coordinator. So it was almost hard to find a research coordinator who just had that much time left over. And eventually it worked out for me because we had some thoughts about collecting some sort of standardized follow-up at certain time points as part of the regular clinical practice. And I eventually spent the $10,000 on, I think, statistical support and some other things. But it's true. I think we do have to, if you're especially one of the newer investigator grants, you have to be a little bit strategic about how that is to be spent. And I really like Prakash's idea. Like if you are part of a larger group and they already have data that's collected, it's, I think, a great way of doing a sub-analysis or some sort of modeling for a future grant type of thing.
Yeah, just to echo that. I mean, for the first couple of grants, we were trying to do a prospective observational study understanding bone stress injuries in high school athletes, and then paying for incentives to complete DEXA scan. So again, I think we use the majority of the funds in those first couple of grants towards incentives, but I mean, we ended up publishing 3 papers off of those grants, but a lot of the existing personnel was in place to do do the work. I think for the biomechanical study, it was looking at insoles, but also looking at other like updates for like DEXA software that we were able to use to again, work with an existing data set and run a new kind of statistical modeling to understand properties of bone. Mid-career, we, again, with more money, that actually ended up paying for actual DEXA scans, patient incentives, the infrastructure costs of doing high-resolution peripheral quantitative computed tomography of metatarsal bones. And then when we look at this RCT we're putting for Achilles tendinopathy, again, we're really bootstrapping this. I mean, a big part of what we're going to be using the money for is incentives to maintain the cohort. And you got to pay enough to maintain that very valuable data set. And you can blow through $30,000 pretty quickly if you're trying to keep people going for a full 6 months. So again, what I have to lean on though is the infrastructure that I do have for other personnel to be involved in doing the study, some in-kind support with industry to actually make this study possible. But I think that's also part of what you need to communicate when you're putting the grant together. It can't be this like pipe dream where like I'm going to do an RCT for $10,000. It just that leads to questions. One is like, how good is your mentor team? Like, did someone now flag this for you? Two, have you been given enough support to put this grant together? I mean, those are all things that I think are really important when you're putting together a grant. And again, if you have a friend or a colleague, or I mean, shoot, if somebody emailed me and said, could I see your new investigator award? I'd find it and I would just send it to you, because it's not like there's trade secrets there. It's more like, I wanted to study adolescents, so we're running, and that's not going to be very relevant, but the sections and the approach on statistics and how I thought about a budget and how I thought about my career goals, those are all very relevant criteria that are important to the grant as well.
Other comments?
Actually, I just thought about it. I mean, we should just put your grant up like on the internet.
Well, I think that's a good action item. And I mean, I'm not trying to put you guys in a spot, but it's like, you can all quickly commit to putting our grants up and making them available through the foundation. Because, again, I think it's a lens to kind of understand the thought process that goes into putting together a successful.
So I think you get a sense of the variety of ways you could use the funds, and it's important. I like the idea of being strategic, but also being very specific. But you heard a number of different ways that that the money could be spent. So I wonder if you could also, if you think of it, could be specific about how you've included data that was collected using foundation funds in very specific larger grant proposals to the federal government or to other organizations, because that's sort of key to this, is sort of the idea of, that's what seed funds are, is to use it, to leverage it to drive other projects.
So I guess I'll start. Finishing residency, I had, not as many papers as Prakash, but I think I had maybe like 20 papers, and 4 or 5 of them had some form of support through the foundation. And it built credibility that I actually was doing work that was valuable in terms of observational work on bone stress injury. And that led to collaborators when I came to Harvard that were like, you're doing some good work. Would you like to work with us? And I think that's really kind of the key, is you get that momentum, and that also then allows you to be added. I've been part of other grant proposals where I'm seen maybe as a co-investigator or key personnel because I have the clinical experience, but I also have some research background. And even though I don't have NIH grants to my name, people still say, yeah, he's done some good work and he's got some good publications to his name. And that's kind of how I used it as a launching pad when I joined.
I'm not sure if I have a great answer for this. I think the grant funding that I had was really helpful in trying to turn my research around from being mostly injection-based, because that's the type of research I was involved in training, to now my research is more about modeling and kind of predicting just outcomes and trying to further personalized treatment of back pain. So it's kind of, I have a lot of PhD colleagues that I rely on. And so I think, I'm not sure if I can say that.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, okay.
That's a beauty. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the definition of research success is not necessarily getting NIH funding. So we all have different models of that. So, but I think one thing I will say, firstly, as Adam sort of alluded to, I think if you get a grant, even if it's in residency or you're now an early career attending or mid-career attending, and you're saying, I want research time. If I was I'm not a chair of a department, we have a chair of a department at the end of this, but if I was chair of a department, I probably wouldn't give you research time if you didn't have some street cred in that negotiation. So getting grants, even if it's a small, like new investigator grant, and that's prestigious, that most PM&R chairs know what that is. And you can use that as a negotiation leverage tool, particularly if you're more further along in your career. I think it's so helpful. And I think the challenge is if you suddenly stay in your fourth year of residency, or you're now like trying to pivot when you're a full-blown attending, it's very hard to really have that. So I think that's certainly, having that is really helpful. The other thing, if your chair is someone that is very scientific, they'll want to know what is your deliverables so far in your research domain. So for me, when I was left Pittsburgh for residency and then went to Shirley Ryan, I think I had some foundation grants. I published some of those grants. So not only is it just getting the grant, but it's then obviously the deliverable from that is getting data, and that data is then pilot data to then apply for likely a K award, which is what I did. And then, so that's the way that I used it, was not only to just use it for getting another grant, but also as to further my CV to then get the job that I wanted as well at the place that I wanted. So, so I think you can do that. So, and it has sort of that first couple of grants that I got did lead to the K award that I received.
So these are good points, because it's not only the money, it's of course I like street cred. It gives you credibility, but also looks good on the CV, looks good to the future employers, future mentors, really valuable.
Just to add one point, and this isn't to douse water on anyone who is a current attending. I mean, we found this to be helpful for us kind of at that residency level, but for a young attending or a mid-career attending, because I know some of you in the audience, all right, we're a little further out from residency. I mean, the burden to do this grant is so much lower than trying to put together an NIH or a DoD proposal, right? And the likelihood of success for funding is relatively low, even if you're an experienced researcher. So this is also another opportunity if you're trying to make a pivot and you're trying to do more in research to start to build that credibility within your department so that people are like, oh, wow, this person really took the time, put this grant together. I know departments like when you have grants, they like talking about that you won a grant at a major national meeting. Let's not be naive. That's part of the competition here with all the different academic medical centers. So there's a lot of goodwill that also builds for your institution by applying for and winning these awards, which I think also gives you that opportunity maybe then to try to move a new direction where maybe you are trying to do more research at a later date, even if you don't come in with these awards.
It's funny that you say that, because as a department chair, I look at the grants as not only an opportunity to get funds to help support the individual and the research program, but also because it reflects peer review. It means that the person has survived and done well and been successful related to having a project that has been reviewed by peers. That's a very positive part of it. I agree. Other comments? Let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about the review process. And I wonder if you could talk about your own personal experience with the review process or the criteria, or what the experience was like. Adam, do you want to start?
So, I mean, for me, the first thing I would say is just the basics. Like, well-written grants. No grammatical errors, no weird formatting where it's like justified one section, then it's left shift on the next. I mean, if you look at it from afar and you're like, that looks weird, you should probably have someone take a look at your formatting. I mean, so as a grant reviewer, if I'm reading something and it really looks sloppy, that's not a good initial impression, and it's going to detract from the great science that you're trying to do. So like, I think that's one like key criteria. And this always comes up when, you're like in the RMSTP pre-application pathway and they talk about grantsmanship. Like you shouldn't have typos, and you should also have your friends and colleagues that take a look at it, and especially those that might not even know the subject. And if they're reading it and they're confused, that's also a red flag, because you may have reviewers that don't have the same content expert. But then it's also just like, are you actually answering the questions, right? So like, if you're talking about why winning the grant is important, like, really tying it back to like, what is the goal for the foundation? But even when you look at the grant applications, there's a number of different ones you could apply for. So you really need to make it specific to the topic that you're looking at. And even looking back on the prior grants that have been funded and the topics, you're like, all right, this sounds like a topic that would be consistent with the vision for the Nadler Award, versus, yeah, this might fit into a different domain of like chronic pain. Those would be kind of the broad stripes, I would say, is when I'm reviewing it. Like, again, if it's easier to read, that's good. If like the font's changing mid-sentence, that's not great. Ask the question, why, you just get distracted. And remember that a lot of times they talk about how the reviewers are also people that are very busy. So make their lives easier. Headers, like a logical thought process. These are all like basic things. I won't comment on AI. I feel relatively allergic to it because I feel like it detracts from actually thinking about what you're writing. I do think, though, that sometimes people will also look at AI to put together proposals because they can pull some of the science together, or at the very least make sure the grammar is good. But I would also say that for me would be a red flag if I looked at this and I said, like, this looks like it's an AI generated proposal. But using kind of all the resources to like put together a really strong proposal, like that for me, those are the proposals I'm like excited to read, and you're cheering for the person, and then you want that person to win the award. That's where you want your grant reviewer to feel at the end of the day. Like, I understand this is going to help people in physiatry. It's going to help this individual. They have great support around them. They have a great team. They're going to be successful.
I echo almost everything Adam says. I mean, I do actually think AI is helpful in actually correcting typos. Sometimes when you have a really long grant application, Word document or whatnot, what you used, it might not even highlight all the typos. And so sometimes they can even pick up some grammar mistakes, which I find helpful. But I think you really need, as someone who's writing a grant, to have a clear idea of what you're writing. And sometimes I feel like AI just cannot do that. Like, you should think out what you're trying to write, and then maybe you can use AI mainly for editing purposes. But the key here is really, when you write any grant, you have to answer the questions. And I think at the foundation, the way the application is set up, it is pretty clear what it's asking for. The only thing I would add is I think tables and figures, if allowed, can be very helpful. And I had a really great mentor who once told me, you almost want to tell the almost entire picture of what you're trying to do with your figures and tables, because people are busy and they're not going to read every word. But if they can glance through and understand a bit of what's going on, that it may pique their interest, or at least like kind of tell them a little bit of what you're doing. It should make sense when you're just going through them.
That's a good point.
And I don't know if this is going to come up here, but I had to say, like, becoming a grant reviewer really made me a better grant writer.
Right.
And it's because if you don't understand what's going on the other end, it's hard to know how to write for your audience. So again, a great plug for people who to volunteer to be become.
I agree. I became a better grant writer when I started reviewing grants for NIH and foundations. I agree.
Yes, being the last one to speak, I echo everything. I will say a couple of other things. I think one thing that you saw the list of reviewers there. The foundation is a bit like any other foundation. I think really what they're trying to do is support researchers or individuals who want to go maybe into a little bit more research or research career, but it's also to clinical relevance. When I did study section last year and for NIAMS, and that is sometimes in those conversations, it wasn't always clinically relevant. Everyone was focused on the minutiae of a specific pathway that I had never even heard of, and I was the only physician on that panel. So here it's really about trying to show the clinical significance of what you're doing. And if you see those panelists or the reviewers, the names that Dr. Roth earlier, like I've reviewed the MSK grants. I'm not always a domain expert on that grant, but if the person can tell the story so that I can understand it, I think that's super helpful. Or it's something where I can look it up, but it's still correct what they're trying to say. I think that's really good. So the best grants have been the ones, I'll give examples, but the best grants I've had are the ones that actually are able to tell the story, as Patricia said, like very succinctly, and make it clear that even if you're someone in this field or not in this field, you would understand what you're trying to do. I'm not trying to say dumb it down for someone like me, but try and make sure that it's clinically relevant and how it's going to help the field. On the flip side, the worst grants that I've had have been the opposite, where they just only talk about clinical relevance. There's no hypothesis that they actually state. And so then it's like, as Adam said earlier, that it's clear that person hasn't received mentorship. There's no guidance as to writing a research grant, because it's just basically text from a literature review and sort of very nebulous in what they're trying to do as well. So I think if you can get across the clinical relevance in a small application, but also and the scientific expertise is shown by a lot of the question you're going to answer, like the hypothesis, etc., through the hypothesis that you're going to state and what you're testing. I think those are the best grants.
I tell junior people that I spend as much time on the grantsmanship kind of issues as I do on the science itself. So if you have that experience as you're writing, don't be surprised about that. About all the things you heard today, about the details of how to write the grant application itself. Good. Other questions or comments? Yes. Oh, sure. We have a mic for you.
So I'm a fourth-year student at UT Southwestern, and so my previous background was in computer science, and I worked at a biotechnology company for about 2 years. At that company, I felt like I was building someone else's dream, and so part of the reason why I decided to pursue medicine was I wanted to build my dream and some of my ideas. During my medical school career, I've sort of been able to contribute to other people's labs and sort of help and research in that way. Obviously, it's a journey from becoming a researcher in a lab to owning your own lab. And this seems like a very pivotal step in that process. Can you speak to the overarching trajectory and how that journey goes from becoming a researcher to owning your own lab, or say owning your own company or something like that?
Yeah, I think I did a PhD in Missouri, and my mentor was very clear that you need to fly and go but he was very supportive of that. I think what you need at your stage is actually likely that will come. Your own independence will come. Right now, you need to sort of have a mentor and contribute to the mentor's lab. And finding that mentor is probably very pivotal. And you need to find a mentor that has the same attitude as I described with my mentor, where it was like he understood that it was contributing to his lab, but also understood that it was contributing to my career. And those are the best mentors. So finding that, I think, is right now what I would suggest you try and focus on. And you're fourth year, so you're probably going through it right now. So when you're on the interview trail for your for residencies, I'm guessing it's just started, I did the same thing. I would go to programs. I had already done, similar to you, I had a background, you have a background, although you didn't do a PhD, you have a background in a particular area where when I was interviewing for residencies, I just finished my PhD. So then I wanted to make sure I could continue my science and try and make it work elsewhere. And so every time I'd go to an interview, I would have done background on the specific place where I was interviewing to see if there was some particular researcher in that domain. And fortunately there was at the program that I matched at, but that's what you should ask that, because that's really, really important for this next step in your career.
Other comments?
Yeah, I would echo what Prakash said. I mean, as going into residency, you might want to, if you have the flexibility of being able to choose geographically where you end up, you might want to think about, is there a mentor at the residency where you're wanting to go that might be a good mentor for you? And the same for people who are transitioning from residency or fellowship to their first job. I think in retrospect, I should have been more careful in negotiating for things when I started my first job. I had assumed that, it's an academic center. I would have the same setup and the same set of resources. And now, like, thinking about it, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, like I'm the second physiatrist there. There's not a lot of people doing injections. And here I want to do injection research. And how am I going to get the volume to do that, right? So I could have negotiated for more support, or research money, or maybe have thought that I should have done some other lines of research that doesn't require a lot of people to do a lot of injections. So I have the numbers I need. But it's great you're thinking about it so early. That's great.
Yeah, just to echo that, I think, you're going to match. And then the next question is, all right, you go through like your prelim year, or maybe you have a combined program, but starting to look at who's doing work in that institution, who has experience mentoring residents. I think that's another thing too, is like, getting a sense. I mean, when you're like looking at a K award, you're looking for like career researchers that have a history of all these people did a K under my lab, right? So I think more along the lines is like you build towards that role of independence, and it's graduated level, very similar to like residency, where it's like people are watching everything you're doing and signing off, to you being more of an independent learner, to being to the point where you're actually an attending, where you're full-fledged and you're doing things on your own. Same thing in research. You're trying to find that mentor, and even thinking about like the lead into that. Sometimes you could be doing something like a literature review, or you could be working with an existing data set and kind of building that experience and that trust, so that you get to the point where you're like, look, there's this great opportunity to apply for this grant through Foundation of PM&R, and is there maybe a sub analysis that I could support in this work? And if it's in their domain, then you build that trust, you probably can run with that a lot more effectively.
I had many years of being a professional second author or third author, and many years of actually feeling like I was contributing extensively to other people's work. And sometimes it was my ideas and they were the ones taking the credit. It was frustrating, but it was also rewarding. I learned a lot. And at some point, it's a process. At some point, you evolve into gaining more independence. As you gain more opportunity, confidence, it happens. But there's value to, as you said, contributing to other labs. Great question. Other comments, questions?
Just dovetail off that.
Yeah, sure.
The shout out earlier about being further out.
I'm cheering for you, man. You're one of my fellows.
So I guess my question now is, as someone who's been in attending, and then I'm 100% clinical, and don't have experience writing grants or doing funded research, what type of mentorship or team would you sort of recommend that I try to build around Lysum?
So Eric, you'll contact me and we'll do a Zoom call, and you'll go to Cindy Lynn and you'll talk to her, and then you'll talk with Jana Friedley, and people will be excited that you're interested in doing research. But then the goal is to make sure it's not a pipe dream, but you're actually thinking about what do you see relevant. And I know your practice, so you do shockwave, and maybe there's a unique population that hasn't been described, and we talk about it, and I say you should come up with aims and hypothesis around that. And then you come with a plan to say, like, look, I'm looking to do a little bit of a pivot in my career to kind of diversify what I'm doing. This is the return on investment. I think you can get there. And I'm happy to support you, but I'm happy to support anyone in this room. I mean, that's the cool part about being part of the foundation is we're trying to move the field forward, and there's so few of us doing research. So, I mean, that's why I was like super excited when I was asked to be part of this panel. It's like, this is cool. I'll share my experience, and hopefully someone finds it helpful, and they have a better experience in research too.
I actually have total admiration for people who decide to do those sorts of things, something different, change their direction, change their focus, their career, mid-career or somewhere into their career. There's a lot of challenges about it, of course, but there's actually going to be a lot of opportunities for support for that. I think it's a terrific thing to be thinking about. And there are mentors as well for that. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, just adding to that, I think you seem very connected already. So many people are jumping in line to mentor you. Others might not be so lucky. I think, the foundation of PM&R, even if you just applied without having great mentorship, like you will get a review back, and that itself is some mentorship. But I would probably not go that route. I do think it would be good to go to some societies kind of close to what you're doing. So you could find those people at APMR. There's a session that's kind of in line with what your research interested in, then introduce yourself to the speakers afterwards. I mean, most of us who go into academics, we want to mentor the next generation or help our colleague out in trying to pursue more research. So I think we would all be open to that if you just asked. And then I know I'm part of some other, I'm not really sports, so I'm more like spine and pain. There's a lot of societies and there's mentorship programs, and there's some specifically for research. So I would encourage you guys to also reach out and try to find those.
I'm going to go a different direction. Not to be I'm not being controversial, but I think Adam and Patricia's points are really good. I actually think one model that I have seen for clinicians, which is I don't see very much in PM&R, but it's probably because of some of the ortho background I've had, is that a lot of orthopedic surgeons, they are the ideas generator and they collaborate with a PhD, and the PhD is the scientist who's applying for the grants, and then the orthopedic surgeon. The orthopedic surgeon is not purely like just a recruitment tool, but they're providing clinical acumen for the lab. And so that is another model to think about, and actually might be a lot more realistic. I'm not saying it's not realistic, your research career, but it actually might be more fulfilling, right? It's very hard to write research grants and maintain your clinical productivity and your RVUs that you need to do. And it's something I've thought about myself doing as I go forward in my career, and maybe leadership opportunities come and administrative responsibilities come. It's like, there's only so many hours in the day. So I think doing something like that, and unfortunately in Northwestern, we don't have like a musculoskeletal lab I can be the clinical acumen for. I have to be that right now. But at UW, I'm sure there's opportunities to do something like that. And so that may be another model you want to think about. I just don't think it's something that we hear a lot in PM&R, but I think it's something that a lot of other specialties do, and we should think about.
Good question. Other questions, comments? Yes, in the back. You have the mic.
Hi. First, thank you for organizing this panel. I'm currently a resident in a new program that is not very kind of like research oriented. However, I do have previous research experience in terms of like the research methodology. My question is related to how you guys formulated your area of interest early on in your career as you submitted your first young investigator grant. My question is, did you rely on your mentor, like previous work? Did you come up with your own ideas? Especially like as a resident, you're like still not decided which fellowship you want to go into, and kind of even if you know what fellowship, you don't know what kind of niche thing you want to extensively study in your career.
Right. So I approached my team physician at Stanford, Mike Frederickson, and told him I was thinking about going into physiatry. And then about a year later, he said that he applied for a grant. It wasn't awarded, but he had this IRB and would I like to be an unpaid research coordinator. And that's how I started the work on bone stress injury, which I've been doing now for 18 years. I was just by saying yes and an opportunity. And you don't know what those opportunities are unless you ask and you express interest in doing that work. So, but what I learned from that experience was what's a model for looking at treating conditions that you're commonly seeing in clinic. And Dr. Fredrickson sees a lot of runners, so he's made a lot of clinical innovation, even though he hasn't had a long track record of NIH funding. But what I was able to do then is take those skills and pivot to the other work that I'm interested in doing, such as interventional studies like shockwave and PRP. But you have to start with a mentor that has a topic area and has an expertise. And at the end of the day, it should be something that's fun. Like, I didn't realize how much fun I would have learning about bone stress injuries. I was like, I want to understand running injuries and I want to go into physiatry. And I think what Dr. Fredrickson does is really interesting. And I think that would be really fun to do what he's doing when I grow up. And that's the model I built out for my clinic now.
Yeah, I would say compared to Adam, and I think Prakash as well, I haven't stuck to one specific research topic. I think I really enjoy working with a team when I do research. And so if I find people I like to work with, then we almost like negotiate and find what topic that would be interesting to both of us. And kind of like what Prakash mentions, like where I am, there's a lot of PhDs and they do great work. And so some of my roles is just I serve as co-Is on their NIH level grants, and that's been very fulfilling for me. And so sometimes you can either go with what you really truly are passionate about, or you can just see what's available and see what kind of people you want to work with. And I think that can also be quite fulfilling too.
Thanks. I agree with everything. I think that you probably heard about the RMSDP program through the AE, and the first question they would ask you if you were on the RMSDP is, what's your research domain? So I think if you're trying to figure out, so what's your clinical interest? What is the population that you want to treat? That will help answer which area of research you should potentially focus on. The best part for me of being a physician scientist is that I can actively help my patients that I see every day with knee osteoarthritis through my research, or I recruit from our clinic. And so that's the patient population I'm passionate about. Those are the people that I want to see. And so you have to think about, like, on your day-to-day, what is the patient population that you would want to see? And then which is the population and how do you want to help them? And that's, I think, if you answer that question, then you'll start thinking about, okay, who in my institution, and it doesn't need to be in your institution, it'll be local to where your residency is. You start making the links to that individual. That's a great start as well. And then the other part that may happen is you may not have that perfect domain expert in your area, but you can always still do some element of research in residency. There's always some retrospective chart reviews you could do. There's always maybe sometimes even prospective studies like collecting data. There are survey studies you could do that will grow your publication record. So then when you start, for that job, or you then start trying to reaching out to labs, as Adam mentioned earlier, and you're going to have that street cred that they're going to be like, oh, this person has a publication record. It's not perfectly in my domain, but they seem to have some potential to want to do research.
And there's a number of willing and very generous potential mentors throughout the field. You have a few of them here and elsewhere. So that's sort of a key point also. Thank you. Other comments or questions? Yes, sure.
So I'm a third year resident on the base Florida period program, and our research opportunities are very limited. I'm applying for sports medicine fellowship, and even sports medicine opportunities are very limited. But I'm very interested in doing research on tennis, for example, and tennis-related injuries. I played a couple of years of professional tennis, so I'm pretty looped in with connections. And I talked to these two people. One's a PhD, but he does work on, he builds bombs for Lockheed Martin, and then another guy who builds tennis rackets, and they're always tinkering in their garage, building different rigs to test equipment and
Bombs too? Really?
look at it. But I think this would be. I have a few ideas for looking at tennis equipment and injury risk, and but the thing is, I don't have a mentor, and it's hard to find a mentor in this area, I feel like. And do y'all have any pointers for that?
I'm passing on this one. Bombs and tennis. I'm not sports.
You should talk to Nehru Jabalan out of Emory.
I've reached out to him a couple of times, but I don't know. I'm afraid to bother too much because I'm rotating with him in March, and I don't want
to bother him then.
That's fair.
No, you could comment. You could. I'll be calm.
I think that's, sometimes I have people that just, will cold call me and send me an email, and I try to be helpful, even if I don't have an opportunity trying to direct people. So Nehru's a good guy. I know him personally, and everyone is relatively slammed, but a way to kind of broaden the base is like, who's doing this domestically, doing like a search. There are a number of different like search engines, even through like through PubMed of looking at who is doing work in racket sports, and that helps you to start to narrow in. And then you figure out, does the geography make sense, or is this a place that I'm matching for sports?
We have time for one more question. Yes.
So a little bit earlier, whenever I was describing that particular journey, I think that everyone echoed that finding a good mentor and sort of what are the qualities that I should be looking for, maybe some common questions that I should ask. It seemed a little bit difficult. Like I personally don't know if I like the Zoom format. I'd like to meet people, get to actually talk to them. But if there's any questions or qualities that I should be looking for in a mentor, how do I sort of elicit that?
So in general, I would say I've had amazing mentors, and I think that what you should look for is the track record of prior trainees from that particular lab, the expectations of the mentor, and I always say mentorship's a two-way street. So the expectations of them of you and you of them. Some places like I don't think Northwestern does this now, but they even have contracts between you and the mentor. So that's actually getting more serious. I wouldn't. That has not happened to me yet. No one's throwing a contract at me. But that would be the other thing. And then the philosophical thoughts that you have. So my mentors are, who's Dr. Roth is one of them. They are very open, and their door is always open. And if you have a problem, you can call them on the phone. Those are the kind of things that you want to find from prior trainees about the mentor that can really help. I've had probably one bad mentor experience, and that experience was where the person was institutionally having problems. And so that person basically was struggling in the institution. And so that's because they didn't have that loyalty or happiness in the institution, it sort of started to get transferred to me and bring me down. And so the mistake I made was I was very focused on getting to the institution and less so thinking about, well, is this mentor right for me, if that makes sense? So like we were just talking about finding the residency. This wasn't in residency, but this was when I started my job. I was focused on going to Chicago and being at that job, less so like worrying about the mentor. I was like, I wanted the job first and then the mentor. In hindsight, I probably should have worried about that as well. And now it's all worked out. That person, he's not my mentor anymore, but that might be something else to think about. And when I found out later, the track record of trainees was not great either, because you also want to know how successful the trainees have been, not just whether they had a good experience.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about the question prior to yours, and it's hard. I mean, there's people who are very successful at research and very renowned, but if they're very busy right now and they're not having the bandwidth to take someone else, then sometimes trying to force a mentorship cannot. I've had experiences where I try to force a mentorship with someone, And I feel like that sometimes cannot, it just doesn't end up being very successful. So I think the track record is really important, but it is also just like figuring out, does this person have time for me right now? Because I think there are a lot of mentors who are not, who may not have had a great track record, but if you just get the sense like someone's really invested in you and wanting to help you out, I would probably give them a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have to think about like the communication style, and again, kind of understanding the expectations. And sometimes that's even an uncomfortable conversation about authorship. So I just bring it up point blank with people. I was like, I've been burned before. I'm just going to let you know this is the expectation I have. This is the key deliverables. This has been my experience with every trainee publishing with me. This is where I think you would be on the author list. That could change depending on whether or not we're able to accomplish the things that we talk about together. So the more transparent you can be, the better. And that might not be the first conversation you're going to have with a potential mentor, but to have a better understanding for what their expectations are and what success looks like, that's even kind of an open-ended question. Like, what does success look like for you, or from a mentorship role, in terms of what you'd hope I'd be able to accomplish based on the goals I've shared with you. And that helps you to understand. It is a two-way street, though.
Well, thank you all. Those were great questions and great interactions and discussions. And thank you to our extraordinary panel. Appreciate that. Thanks for joining. Best wishes to everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thanks.